Hey, and welcome back, everybody, to our officially, I guess this will be our second episode of the rebooted LA Sessions broadcast. For those of you who caught our last episode on environmental protesters, I appreciate you for watching and tuning in today as well. And if you didn't get a chance to watch it, just click on the channel, YouTube, Spotify, or Apple, wherever you listen, and find it. That one went a little long, about an hour 40 minutes, because our guest host for last episode, Willie Costa, went into very good detail about just renewable energy, alternatives, and all that stuff. So it's very, very informative. I offer some mental health insights into it as well, and it was a good launch for our new rebooted session. So, and as I said in session 0, we're going to have a rotating panel of guest hosts on LA Sessions, and everyone comes on is going to really cover something different. And I think that variety is the spice of life. And so here you guys are. Today's guest is Melody, and I'll let her introduce herself and her specialty.
Hi, my name is Melody Gorzycka. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, licensed in the state of California. I am currently working at a private practice called Wise Mind Counseling out of Riverside County. So I've worked in the mental health field for the last 8 years, doing various different jobs and working with various different populations. I've worked with couples, individuals, families, children, adolescents, older individuals. My specialties have really ranged over the years, and so has the populations that I've worked with. What has always stayed the same is definitely the approach that I've taken with all of my clients. It's kind of an eclectic approach. Bryan, we went to school together. Our school definitely highlighted mindfulness and the use of ACT, MBCT, the more, I guess, what people might call new wave modalities.
Right.
So I don't focus on any one particular one, but I definitely use mindfulness a lot and MBCT, ACT. I use EFT with couple clients. It really just depends on my client's need on where I'm going to pull from. But something that my clients will always tell you is that I make everything digestible.
Yeah, I'm just curious about that, because I've noticed that there has kind of been this shift towards I don't want to say less conventional, but kind of just strategies in therapy. Like EMDR has kind of blown up. For example, I've noticed, for example, if I do mindfulness exercises with clients, it's always funny. The reaction's always the same. They kind of squint their eyes a bit and think like, "What is this mumbo jumbo? This doesn't sound like therapy." But once they start doing it, then they kind of see that it helps. Once they kind of like just get rid of that defensiveness, and they jump into it, it actually really helps. Has that been your experience as well?
Oh, yeah. I've had to tell most of my clients, like, hey, I know that this is going to sound a little weird. It's not going to seem like this is going to work. You're going to have to try it a couple of times. You'll understand after the first time, but you'll really start seeing the long-term effects as you continue using it. My clients come back and they're like, okay, yeah, I thought that was complete bull, but it actually worked really well. And I'm like, there we go.
Yeah. And I think maybe that's going to be a good segue into our topic today about how sometimes new things can be good, sometimes maybe not, but either way, adaptability is definitely crucial in this day and age. And I mean, today we're covering modern dating, and this is one of those topics where it's like, you can almost go like 5 different episodes if we're being honest, but we'll try to condense it down. And so let's discuss. Let's talk about modern dating. Is it like the idea of soulmates for life, or is it just proof that Cupid is a sick son of a bitch? Let's discuss. Now, the world of modern dating has, let's be real, it's changed. See, I'm a child from the 80s. You're younger than me. You're like more of a 90s girl, right? But like the world of modern dating doesn't resemble on the surface what it used to be, of just people meeting somewhere. Guy gets girl's number, guy calls back 2 days later, they go on a date, fast forward, they fall in love, get married, have a couple kids, and then if you go to like the era of like my parents, then it's even even simpler. Expectations were simpler, roles were simpler, everything was just simpler because there were less hoops to go between, right? But in your opinion, what are some of the contributing factors for the changes we're seeing now?
Some of the contributing factors to the changes that we're seeing, I do think that people's roles is definitely a contributing factor as we've gone into the 90s, the 2000s, the 2010s, the 2020s. Everybody's roles have been ever changing. There's been a greater acceptance of what people want to do. Women are out in the workforce more now. Men are staying at home a lot more now. And so I think that that's contributed greatly. Not only that, but modern dating is really based out of like who's sliding into your Instagram DMs, who's finding your stuff on TikTok or Twitter, X. I think it's called X now, right?
X.
Not Twitter.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
But
yeah,
that's kind of, I think, two of the biggest contributing factors. Yeah, I would say the pandemic was too, because after going through pretty much social isolation, we didn't get to go out and socialize with people and talk with people. It became a lot more difficult to have face-to-face conversations.
Yeah.
So I would say that those three things have definitely been like the biggest contributing factors to the changes that have happened in the dating world, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree. Because, I think for a lot of people, the simple answer is technology, but I think there's way, way more of a psychological root. And I think you touched on a lot of it is expectations have changed. And I think people, like, for example, men in the past who were maybe like very assertive and would just in another time, they would have been like the Fonz on Happy Days or something, right? Now, that may or may not be attractive to some women who are maybe a little more comfortable with being matched with somebody on letting the algorithm match them on a dating app, and then they meet with someone who maybe like matches their energy level better versus someone who's like just like this Giga Chad who's just like full of confidence and is like just isn't afraid to ask every girl at the bar out. Maybe they're not ready for that. They don't want that. And so that guy's expectations now are like, what planet am I on, right? Like how do I not get these women? Well, like you say, expectations have shifted. And playing to another point you said, it's like it used to be the standard was what, like it's the working class guy and then the stay-at-home wife or something, right? But yeah, more and more we're seeing certain men, whether they're stay-at-home husbands, or maybe it's not even that they're stay-at-home husbands, but they're not in the traditional sense, but maybe they stay at home because they work remotely, right?
Yeah.
And so the expectation on them now is like, well, since you're home, fool, go vacuum, do that on your break, have dinner ready for me, and now it's the woman that comes home and expects that. And so even though he may not be the sort of like stay-at-home spouse that just, they don't have a job, they do have a job, but they just don't leave. Like you said, pandemic had an effect on dating, but so many other things. Employers, I think in some ways saw that they could save money on the bottom line by just having remote work. They don't have to do office spaces anymore. As that's evident by all the freed up office spaces available in real estate. And so there's so many shifting patterns, I think. But, I think something we can also kind of talk about too, though, is then there may be the shifting patterns, but do you think that like the traditional expectations, let's say that women had of men in the past, would you say some of those are still prevalent today, or are they like becoming less and less the norm?
I think that they'll always be prevalent. I don't think that there'll ever be a time where those traditional norms or those traditional views of what that dynamic would hopefully look like will ever go away.
Yeah.
Because there's always going to be differences in different people. And so you're always going to run into women who are going to be like, yeah, it would be great to have this guy who is definitely an alpha male who is going to come home and hope that dinner is on the table and maybe I'm looking nice in a nice dress and ready to have a good dinner with him to help him unwind from the day, who's the breadwinner, who, is doing all of these things, and I'm focusing more on the house and keeping things clean and making sure that the groceries are here. Right? That's always going to be a dynamic that people want. And if you keep an eye on social media, there was a trend a little while back that was like, yeah, I get to be that wife. I get to be that person who is at home while my husband does this. Right? So just like, I don't want to say just like any kind of trends, but that's kind of where it is. Just like any kind of patterns, as you and I know from working in this field, they're going to come back around. They're always going to be prevalent.
Yeah.
And on the other end, I'm curious, Bryan, do you think that men's traditional views or views of women in the relationship are always going to be around, or do you think that it's something that's going to decrease over time?
I think they will definitely be around. In fact, I think men have been slower to adapt and acclimate than women because, and I kind of covered this a little bit in the last episode I was in about like this this idea of men's rights groups, which is, I'm sorry, like say, okay, it should be noted that I'm not a huge fan of modern radical feminism. I'm a big fan of traditional feminism, the ones that got a lot of women to the dance today. But I find it laughable that men like that have to feel like they have to form this black pill online movement, and it's kind of synonymous with the whole incel movement. But what it is a bunch of negative men who really focus on the things they don't have. And as you know, in our line of work, that really leads to like anxiety, sometimes depression, because you're not focusing on your strengths. You only focus on things you cannot control, like your height, things like that. And they don't, and then as a result, they lose control of the things that they should have control over, like their health, their wealth, and things like that. Yeah. And it's like, yes, those men represent, I think, the worst of the men who have not acclimated, whose expectations are the same maybe as their fathers, their grandfathers, and going back to the whole lineage, because they're like, well, I shouldn't have to be this good-looking guy. I just have to be a provider, and that's enough, and all this stuff. But it's like, no. As a woman's role has changed since the sexual revolution, and they've been able to have control over the birth, for example, with contraceptives and all that, going to work, being able to do the things that women weren't allowed to do in the past. All the strong women that fought for that to get a lot of women to where they're at today. Now the product of all that today, these women have different roles, like you said, like. If they work like a grind, like let's just be real. I mean, in this field, sometimes you leave and you've seen like 10 clients, and it's so unrealistic in one day because there's literally not enough time. But sometimes this field with the demand, and I think that's what the Kaiser therapists in Southern California are fighting for. Shout out to our friends in Kaiser. Keep fighting the good fight. But it was very, what they were being asked to do is very, very unrealistic. Now, granted, I'm biased because I'll wear that bias on my sleeve. A lot of people I think highly of work for Kaiser. And, sometimes it's like, it's sad, but it's like the only break you might get, right, is during a cancellation. Someone cancels, that might be your only real break, And so I use that as an example of like, let's say you're a female clinician. You've already worked like 2 hours overtime, but you're fucking salaried, and so that doesn't help you. And you come home, and if you have a partner that's like, hey, where's dinner, woman? You know what I mean? You're going to be like, what? Say that in my good ear. And so I think some men who have that traditional view, but they're with a woman who is very high value in the workplace, might even contribute more than them. Yeah, they're going to have this identity clash, and I'm thinking the woman is probably going to be the one that that brings that to a head and lets them know, like, no, you're not the man. You might be a man, They be what I call like for me in my practice. Like I'm just like, I encourage men to be the best elevated prime versions of themselves, so they can be the guy. Otherwise, they're just going to be just another guy. You see. And I think some men fall into that category, but they haven't quite reconcile the fact that they're not the guy. They just think they are. And maybe if this was the 40s, okay, and it was like a small town, okay, maybe they could be the guy. But they're just another guy right now, and it's a struggle, and I think that's why some men fall into depression, and then hence they go into these incel movements like the black pill community, where they don't try to make themselves better. They want to make. They're like, I don't need to change. Women need to change. The world needs to change for me. And I'm like, it doesn't work that way, friend.
Yeah, the
Like, I
world's
don't know
going
if
to
you've
keep on
encountered
going.
such. It keeps spinning, baby. You know, like, have you encountered any individuals like that in your life? Where you practice? Sorry, your practice.
Who are stuck in that space, that like just another guy space?
Yes. Yep.
I will say, in the years that I've worked in this field, yes, I've come across that. And my approach to that has been like, okay, so all of this is going on, right? We have this crisis because we have our wife who is doing stuff and making more and being the breadwinner and not falling into all of these things. Okay, so how do we not just be another guy, but be the most elevated form of ourself, so that we can see our contributions, so that we can see what we are doing, right? Not so that we're a step above or she's a step above, but that we're right here. And I've even had to do this in couples where it's been like, okay, one of you has got to come down, one of you has got to come up, one of you got to stop talking about, oh, well, I'm doing X, Y, and Z, and I need these things. Like, yes, we need these things. It's about the way that we're coming about it, right? And if we're coming at it in a certain way, of course, the other person is going to be like, oh, and they're going to fall into that depression, and then they're going to have that anxiety, and it's going to make it all the more difficult in that dynamic, right? So when you talk about elevating to being that guy, I think about, okay, elevating to be the guy here, elevating to be the person here, so that you guys are together and not one step above the other.
Right. Because I always feel like competition amongst couples is like the death knell. Like, it has to be compatibility, not competition. Yeah. And if you make this a race to see who can make more, who can love more, who can contribute more, then you're kind of losing the script, because it's not. See, the things men want in women aren't always going to be the things women want in men, and so the idea of trying to compete in the same arena like that, it doesn't work. You know, it doesn't work at all. It's like two different types of vehicles, but they're in the same race. But you can't put an off-road vehicle with a Ferrari and on a racetrack. No, but if you put the Ferrari on like a mud track, it's going to lose. But couples sometimes have this tendency like, nope, it's the same thing. Nope, we're equals. You know, you got to make as much as me, and then the other one would be like, well, you don't cook and clean as much as me, and it doesn't work like that. And so there's that lack of compatibility that's there. And, you know, like, and actually, speaking of compatibility, let me bring up some stats here, or not some stats, but like some self-reported data, because, you know, we can acknowledge right now, like, the rise in online dating has gone up significantly. I don't have the raw stats of that in front of me, or wait, do I? Because let's see. Okay, I do not, but I know there was a study that showed, like, since the 90s to like the 2000, since 2017, I want to say it's gone up drastically. I want to say it may be under 50%, but I'm not sure if that's counting like social media, because that kind of counts as online, you know, interactions. But let's see, like, so according to like dating apps, let's see. Expectations of women towards men, the 5 top qualities that they report to wanting, and this, I assume, is how the algorithm matches them, is authenticity, clear intentions, good communication skills, confidence without arrogance, and emotional intelligence. Now, just first off, what do you think about that? So authenticity, clear intentions, good communication skills, confidence without arrogance, and emotional intelligence. Would you say those are those in line maybe with what your clients say?
I would definitely say so. As you were saying them, I was like, yep, this checks off a good portion of the top few boxes that I usually hear from clients coming in, is that they want that authenticity. They want to see that somebody is going to be themselves, that they're going to have the confidence without the arrogance to showcase who they are, the things that they like, their views, their beliefs, and not only that, but to stick to them. Because when we're in the online dating world, it's so easy to just be like, okay, well, I'm going to be this person for this date. And I'm
Yeah.
going to put all of these qualities to the side and all of these things that I like. And then it's like you end up in a long-term relationship sometimes with that, hiding those parts of yourself. And then that leads to anxiety and depression and fear and resentment, and it can snowball from there, right? But if
Yeah.
we go into these things and we are sticking true to ourselves, we are communicating. Here's the communication piece. If we are openly communicating and setting boundaries and saying, this is who I am, these are the things that I like, these are the things that I'm not okay with, but clearly, concisely, right, on both ends, then it shows
Hmm.
even more of that confidence. And it also shows that emotional intelligence,
Yeah.
right? Because in order to even say, this is what I like, this is what I need, this is what I'm not okay with, you have to have some semblance of emotional understanding
Yeah.
to know that those are the things that you need or that you're not okay with. Because you
Hmm.
have to be able to say, okay, this experience makes me feel this way. And so this is not something that I can engage in. And
Yeah.
so all five of these qualities that were listed right there are really all intertwined with one another. And it's not even asking too much. That's kind of, nowadays, that's asking for the basics.
Yeah. So I have a couple thoughts about this. I have two big thoughts about it. One is so if people are being matched based on, like, let's say you create your profile and you list qualities that you believe you possess, but this is before you ever even like finalize your profile, because some certain things they ask for your, like, when you sign up for a program, you put in your data and all that before you even buy anything. Well, if they do it like that, okay. However, my concern is then if they let you change that later, because now if like, let's say for example, like someone's listening to our podcast right now, they're like, oh, so those are the five things. Go back to their account, change it to now they become what's matched, but they're not really those things, like you say, right? Like
Yeah.
where now they're being disingenuine. Okay, it would
Mhm.
be the same thing I find, like, and I might have fallen for this once in my supervisory career, where, because I do hiring and stuff like that, where um someone will, like, I once had a fella earlier on ask, like, what is the ideal candidate look for this position I'm hiring for? And then me and the other hire person, oh, well, look for somebody, blah blah blah. They're like, oh, well, that's me, And I was like, oh. And then, well, I'll just say I've never fallen for the old banana in the tailpipe ever since then. But then, like, now I just realize I just gave this guy the test answers. You see,
Mhm.
for the record, I didn't hire him, but it was a clever attempt. But that's what I mean, and I think you can have sly people who maybe on a first date, like, and this is, again, I would say this is pre-dating, online dating, where they kind of had a sniff for stuff like, like, there are a lot of these pickup artists, that kind of do this kind of thing where they're so good at reading women. They'll say, like, oh, what do you like to do? Oh, me too, and then they just kind of roll with it. They're like con men in that sense, or maybe that's kind of harsh. They're just really good at just blending in, I guess. Serial
Chameleons.
serial killers have that quality, but or date rapists, right? I realize I just painted these pickup artists in a really negative light, but yeah, whatever. But you see, there's a tendency to just, yeah, like you say, a chameleon. They'll just acclimate to whatever is popular. Now, so
Mhm.
my second point, though, is, and I find this a little in these kinds of stats, you don't see it, but when you do, like, peer reviewed articles where participants, since it's anonymous and they don't really gain any benefit, sometimes they can be a little more honest. There's one quality that women aren't reporting here that I think would disqualify a lot of men, especially some of these incels, and that is money, 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 status, the ability to acquire resources, have a strong network, say things like that. let's be fair. The majority of modern women, especially women who have a career, particularly a good career, they I think a lot of them have this attitude of, I've had to work really hard because I'm taking advantage of opportunities that my mom, my grandmother maybe didn't have. Okay. And I've achieved at a high level. And I think there's two ways to go with it. But some women are like, I can't date down. There's that idea of hypergamy where women have to date up. And that has nothing to do with being a gold digger. It doesn't have to do anything to do with that. It has to do more with this primal evolutionary need to be like, I help my man in a certain way, but he needs to provide in a certain way. I think that's where it's rooted. And that's why sometimes, like, you might be a millionaire woman, but then who's your man? He might be a billionaire, you see? But even without him, you were really, really good, you see? And then, or you might have women like, and the example I always use is Michelle Obama, where I think they both admit if she really had to push President Obama to be even more, or else he might have just stayed. Was it a senator in Chicago or something like that? He had a strong foundation. He became better because he found the right person that had all the compatibility with them, and that's the best example I could use. But then conversely, you're gonna have some women who, maybe they achieve at a high level, but they can't be with someone who overshadows them because they might feel like, I'm a CEO because I had to be cutthroat and compete with all these men. I had to beat them for this role. I got to be better than any man I'm with too, and maybe that's how it is. But maybe they're like, I need a beta man that can cook and clean for me, and I want to assume the role of the alpha in this one. And sometimes, in fairness, fair play, I hear of incidents where that works out totally blissfully. And it's the guy with the apron, he's baking the cookies, he's like putting the kids to sleep because he has no reservations about that role. He's completely accepted it. And other men may laugh, but the truth is he's happy. And if you judge happiness by like when your head hits the pillow and you got a smile on your face, I'm sure there's some guys that are still in the rat race that haven't quite gotten that level of happiness, and they sleep miserably. They're anxious, and they can watch all of like the men's help videos as they want, but like until they're happy with themselves, they're not going to be happy like the guy that's holding the baby, vacuuming, and doing all that stuff. It is what it is, As long as such said guy is happy in his role, hey, I'll cheer for you, buddy. But it just comes in a conflict, when the couples, I think, fight because of who's got to have the alpha card. So, do you want to hear what men report? Or I'm sorry, did you have a thought?
Before we jump over, I did want to highlight something. I think, so you were talking about how there could be these two different roles for women who are high achieving, right? Where they might end up being high achieving, but then finding somebody who's more high achieving than them. Or they might be high achieving and wanting kind of like that beta partner, right? I think that this came a lot from women's rights and women coming to realize, okay, this is the level of my worth.
Yep.
And so then through understanding the level of their worth, they started looking for things that are going to fit more with who they are and what works for their lifestyle, rather than, okay, let me mold myself to something that this person is going to need, right? That chameleon trait. And this is why you see a lot of women who are probably very, very well informed about adaptability and being that chameleon like we talked about earlier, right? Because back then it was conforming to, okay, here are the things that my partner needs. How do I meet all of these needs, and the needs of the kids and the needs of the household, and then very final bottom level, the needs of myself. And being able to become the person that alpha male, that provider would need, right? And that's not necessarily really highlighting the traits those women would have had back then. Right. And so then here we are years later. Women's rights have come through. Women got the right to vote, rights to our own bodies. We get the right to work in workplaces and do all of the things that we want to be able to do. And so then through that is going to be this increased self-confidence, this increased self-love, and all of the different segments of self-love, self-confidence, self-advocacy, self-respect, self everything. And then through being able to recognize that and own that on our end, it finally became, okay, we get to do the things that we wanted to do and the things that we feel like we need to do to be content in our lives. Okay, now do I want somebody who's going to meet me at this level or at this level?
Yeah.
Or right here in the in-between.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, I agree. And I think that's why, again, men have had to change significantly less. And I think men have been slow adopters of this technology, if you will, because a lot of them are still of the mindset that I just have to be a provider. I just got to just do that. I don't have to be this guy who I got to be the shoulder to cry on when my wife or my girlfriend is really sad. Maybe in the past they would literally be the shoulder to cry, but they didn't know how to help support and fix the situation. They didn't know how to actually hold space. They might have been more like, because men have this innate need to problem solve. Now, I'm not saying all men are good problem solvers. They just think they are. And so they might just say, like, they might just say to the girlfriend, oh, just stop being crazy, like just suck it up. And because that's what they would tell a guy, right? But they think they're being helpful. When sometimes, and I'll say this, some men, this is, you let me know if you agree with this, Melody, but I find that sometimes men, the best tip I can give to how to maybe like support your woman is just, I think the phrase is shut the fuck up and just listen. Just listen to what she has to say, because sometimes her solution isn't your solution. Like some of the guys, like especially like I get like if you're an athlete, you play sports at a high level, your problem, if you're in the game, your problem has to be fixed fast because coach needs you back in the game. And so we're hardwired to be like, suck it up. It's like when Kobe Bryant dislocated his finger, and then the guy, the medical side just bam snapped back in place. He came right back in against the Spurs, right? It's like, wow. But that's how we're hardwired to think. I'm not saying it's always right, because that's more like crisis control, but it's not, down the road. But women, sometimes I find that they definitely need to come to their own conclusions at their pace, and that's why this is just my experience. Just, a lot of times in therapy, I find that men come in, they need to leave knowing that the session contributed to their purpose. Women need to leave the therapy room knowing that I felt heard and validated. I find that's the big crucial difference. If you try to cut off a female client too much and just to kind of like problem solve, I find it doesn't work. Where men, they'll kind of welcome that, but I think it ties to online dating, because or dating in general, because men aren't good at that. They can get better, but a lot of them are just taken by surprise. Like, what is this listening thing? And then they run into that issue. And then they wonder, what did I do wrong? And then they get disenfranchised. They take the black pill, and they become like part of these men's rights groups. And look, I don't want to poo-poo on some of these guys who are like, I will say men genuinely get screwed in like custody court, family court. But if I had to trade that, if I had to give that, relinquish that, like be having an advantage there versus the gazillion of other things where it's really great to be a man, I will take all that shit. Just we're not even talking about rights, like the fact that like, and this is totally unfair, but like men lose weight faster than women. It's just how it, especially when women have to go through a pregnancy. We don't have to worry about that, which is also why I'm hypercritical of men who get really out of shape, because I'm just like, a woman has to work twice as hard as you to lose like those 20 pounds. And it's like, so stop with this this laziness. When you're criticizing them, but you could do better, right? So I would happily, I wouldn't trade all of that. You know what? I'll see my kids a little bit less. I mean, I don't want to downplay that, but I'm like, all the other advantages we have, I'm like, it's that we have to do a rights group. I'm like, come on now. I don't know about that. But yeah, So the other things, so now on the flip side of it, Melody, that men have, and this may or may not shock you at all. So, in no particular order, attractive photos, originality in profile, sense of humor, kindness, and emotional intelligence, plus shared interests and passions. So, again, attractive photos, originality in profile, sense of humor, kindness and emotional intelligence, and shared interests or passion. What are your thoughts on that?
Those are also still looking at great qualities, right? Because we want to know that we're going to have shared hobbies, right? If we look at the different types of intimacy, because we know that there's not just one type of intimacy, and it's not just physical intimacy, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a form of intimacy that's like, okay, can we have the similar hobbies? Can we have these similar interests and things that we can engage in together, right? So that's really important.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to say, yeah, you're kind. Yes, we have emotional intelligence. Those are good qualities to have too. Those are important, right? Because
Yeah.
that's essentially what women are saying. Women are saying we want emotional intelligence, right? And so when men are saying emotional intelligence and kindness, what I kind of pull from that is in that kindness, it's compassion, it's understanding,
Mm-hmm.
right? And maybe even for some people, it is compassion and understanding that they are trying to cultivate that emotional intelligence,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
They're trying to bring it up to that level, right? Like not being so harsh or so critical of things that maybe they don't have yet, or things that they're trying to create change in,
Yeah.
right? If we look at originality and profiles, this could also kind of fall into that authenticity, right?
Sure.
We want to see that originality. We don't want to see somebody being generic, because if we see somebody being generic, that doesn't necessarily mean that they are being authentic. They're falling into what you were talking about earlier of, okay, well, are these really the qualities or are you changing the qualities, right? Because when we're going generic, we're changing the qualities.
Mm-hmm.
We're
Yeah.
trying to fall into the mold, and that's not a good thing.
No. 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 Yeah.
And then there's like, so the pictures thing, this is where I'm like half in, half out. I'm like, okay, yeah, you want to know that the person that you're going to be seeing is going to be appealing to your eye, but also like pictures don't always do in-person meetings justice.
Yes. And that's one that. So it shocks me, but not for the reasons that most people think. Because trust me, most men, I'm gonna go out on a limb. I have no scientific data to back this up. Just trust me, bro. Is yes, they care about looks. I would dare say men care about looks significantly more than women care about looks. Um, uh, but yes, the problem is with online filters. And you know the thing that, and I get it. Women feel because I think women are competitive with each other for sure. They got to be like, I got to get that guy over this girl. But if it means I got to put a million Snapchat filters on and then put filters on top of that, up until the point where it looks like my face has no features, um, uh, you're right, because once once you see them in person, then suddenly like he might feel like he got ripped off, I mean, like sometimes, like, look, you go to buy something, and then when you get there, you realize like the product they were selling, they took certain camera angles because, let's say it's like a car, it's got a scratch on the other side, and it's like, damn it. And so a man might feel ripped off, and he doesn't. And in the moment, he's so angry, he doesn't care that the woman did that, not because she's trying to be fake, but because she knows she has to compete with all these other women. She might think that, like, without a filter, you might think I'm a 7, but all these other girls got filters, and with that, they look like 9s and 10s. So I got to compete. So it's like this. They're a product of what the world has made them in that sense. Now, I don't want to sound like I'm just like disqualifying like bad behavior, but sometimes if it's not a level playing field, that's what people do, right? That's just what they do. They kind of
Yep.
cheat a little bit, but is it cheating if everybody does it? And so I can kind of see that. I think some of the areas that actually surprised me a little bit, though, with that would be like the sense of humor part. That's not that sense of humor is bad. I'm just shocked it ranks so high because I've always kind of attributed that to something that guys want with their buddies. They joke with their buddies. They tell jokes that can't be shared in polite company. Uh, but I'm a little surprised. But that being said, some of the happiest couples I know, that is a quality. They can sometimes they have inside jokes, which are always like the best ones because then everybody thinks you're crazy, but you two are like, no, no, we're our own kind of crazy. But I'm just shocked that it scored that high. You know, some that don't shock me is another one that shocks me is shared interests or passions. Now, shared passions, totally agree. You don't want to get with someone who has no passion for life. They just kind of just lay in bed all day, don't do nothing. But shared interests, that shocks me because I find that there was a study, I want to say at Oxford, that showed that a healthy balance between a married couples is if the guy is allowed to hang out with his buddies twice a week. And the happiness in the marriage is the satisfaction is really high because presumably if he gets to do the stuff he wants to do and she gets to do things that she wants to do, and they're not just like defined by each other, they're just happier in general. So I'm shocked that that scored high at all. To be honest, I was shocked that that would ever be in the top 10 because I don't find most male clients I have. I don't find that like they want to do things with their significant other, like in the terms of like their interests. Like if they like to go shooting at the shooting range, they don't like to take their women. They go golfing. They don't like to take their girlfriend or wife. But when they go on vacation, when they go on dates, yes, they only want to take their woman, obviously. But when it comes to their individual hobbies and interests, I don't find that to be the case. They don't even go to the gym with their significant other, and so so again, I'm shocked. What are your thoughts on that?
You know, I'm actually not as surprised or shocked as you are, because if you think about it, part of green flags of a relationship, yes, balance. We want to have that balance. We need to have time away from our spouse, away from our partner. But when we're together, we also want to have those shared interests, those shared hobbies, because then if we do, right, then there's increased connection there. And not only that, but with that is kind of showing interest in the other person, right? You might come into a relationship and have completely different hobbies, right? But then part of that intimacy that I was talking about earlier and sharing hobbies and sharing interests and things like that is that you guys are able to come together, and if it's not shared, you guys can talk about it together and it can become a shared interest. To give an individual life example, right? My husband loves basketball. Absolutely loves it. He goes out and plays multiple nights a week with some people who live around us. And I'm perfectly content at home while he goes and does that. Right?
Yeah.
When we started our relationship, one of the things that I absolutely adored that he was just kind of like, take it or leave it, was Disney. I mean, you can see Sally up there.
Clearly.
Yeah. And so, yeah, Disney. And so then he took interest in my interest, and Disney became a shared thing, right? We're not by any means Disney adults, but like once a month we'll go and have a nice date night at Disney or something like that, right? And that wasn't something that he was interested in before coming into the relationship. The interest in it grew when we got together, and then there comes a shared interest, right? On the other side, basketball. I don't watch it. I don't play it. Not for me. But he talks to me about it, and I love sharing that with him. I take interest in his interest.
Yeah.
And then if we talk about a shared interest that has always been here, music. We're both musicians, right? Music was the shared interest. And even just beyond that, there are so many other things that we enjoy together. Board games, really messed up card games, without naming them, things like that. So being able to have these shared interests really allows you to have that connection with one another. And I think there are a lot of men out there, at least that I've met, that I've talked to, whether it's in my professional life, my individual life, that have said being able to go out and do things with one another and have some of these shared interests is really, really important, because if we don't, then that connection is not there. That intimacy is not there. And if it's not, it can affect a lot of other areas. You don't have things to talk about. You don't share joys the same way.
Yeah. It seems like what you're describing is shared interests, but with this balanced approach where you're not trying to be a clone of the other person. You
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, something like, for example, music was something that was important to the both of you. You entered into that frame together. And it seems like with Disney, he entered your Disney frame. So you're leading the dance, so to speak. But then with basketball, likewise, like it may be something where you might go to a game with him, but it was his interest. He kind of pulled you into it, but you did it because you wanted to relate. And so I see that as a balanced approach for sure. I guess because I looked into it as an extreme where, like you said, if it's like a balanced approach, it's like, yeah, because I mean, on a certain level, who wouldn't want their significant other to be their cheerleader in some ways, and to be like, oh, you're into that, oh, that's really cool, tell me more, kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so that's an interesting approach, and I can see what you're saying. I guess for me, like I said, it's just like this thing where I see a lot of men that there's a certain individualness they need to hold on to still. Yeah, like I said, there's certain stuff, like for example, things that are almost always attributed with something you do with the boys, hunting, fishing, things like that. And then I always feel like then women will probably have an equivalent, like a girls' night is like, is one, but then the guys have guys' night. But like, I'm sure there are interests out there that women do that most men would probably be like, no, thank you. Like,
Oh, yeah.
let's save that for the girlfriends. But they don't tell her to stop. They're just like, nope, not doing that.
Yeah. Sip and paint, massages, manicures, pedicures, shopping,
Yeah, yeah, you're right.
coffee.
You're right. I don't know any men that have gone to those sip and paints before. Yeah, I don't know
No,
anyone
many.
who has. I mean, maybe if they had it like with like beer on draft, but like, yeah. But then you gotta have the most fucked up paintings, though. These guys will be 3 sheets to the wind. They're just like, everything becomes abstract art. But yeah, huh? Yeah. So, let's see. Like, what do you think about in terms of strategies with the complexity that we've discussed? We're talking about compatibility, we're talking about technology, we're talking just so many different things in this modern age that particularly younger people and some middle-aged people have to contend with. What are some strategies you have moving forward for people that are single and want to meet people? And actually, let me throw some stats for that. Just may alarm some people, maybe it won't, but as of 2022, 37% of men have never been married and are single, and same year, 31% of women single, never been married. And so for that 37 and 31%, what are some strategies that you would suggest to them?
Go out there and be authentic. Be yourself. Don't be afraid to be who you are. And don't downplay or put into a box the person that you are in order to fit into somebody else's mold. With that comes, that emotional intelligence that was highlighted in the statistics on both sides for dating apps. The emotional intelligence, being able to understand what it is that you need, what you want. Don't be afraid to go into that self-reflection and come into these dating scenes with, I don't want to say expectations, but standards and boundaries and knowing what you're looking for. Come in confident in who you are and what you need and what you want. But on the other side, understand that people aren't going to be perfect. Nobody is perfect. We are not perfect. Anybody going into the dating scene, not perfect. We're human.
Yeah.
We're not going to hit 10 out of 10. Nobody's going to hit 10 out of 10. And if they do, honestly, snatch that up. don't let that one go if they hit 10 out of 10 for you. But if they do, also be a little weary. Make sure that it's actually 10 out of 10 and that they're not conforming, right?
Yeah.
Make sure they're
The
not.
10 out of 10 thing is interesting because I remember there was some study about that, about men and women, about expectations. And they were asked like about what if you met a person that had 8 out of the 10, and the men in the group were like, 8 out of 10 is amazing. I would marry her on the spot. They were so happy. The women, a majority of the women were like, 8 out of 10 is terrible. I need all 10. And so that kind of shows, again, maybe perhaps a small sample size, but at least in that size, women tended to demand perfection. Men thought 8 out of 10 is as close to perfect as you're going to get. So it was very interesting in that regard.
It really is. And I wonder how much of that is actually contributed to social media now. Because if you look at social media, there are people who are therapists or psychologists or psychiatrists or in the mental health field, and they're out there posting all of these different things that are a lot of mental health jargon and like tips and tricks and stuff like that. But the thing about it is anything that's on social media, it's up to your own discretion. It's not the same as if you're
Right.
in a therapy room talking to your therapist and your
Right.
therapist can go, okay, here's this. This is what this is how it applies to your life, right?
Yeah. A lot of anecdotal stuff you see on social media, and I'm guilty of this. I'll put little inspirational stuff on my social media for my practice and all that, but like it's always done in a control group. You know what I mean? Like that's always assuming the person has minimal. I don't want to say minimal distractions and obstacles, but it's this idea that like it's not aimed at like the person who's already at rock bottom. And that's not necessarily, because that takes more support and guidance. Like you can read all the Tony Robbins quotes you want, but the reality is that's the one that succeeds most is the one who's ready to make that climb. But some of us aren't ready to make that climb just yet. We're still like processing. And so, you're right. I mean, but that's the nature of social media, right? You need short sound bites and all that. So, yeah.
But going back to the question,
yeah.
the other things that I would say is be compassionate and be understanding. Right? Engage in active listening. And for those of you who don't know what active listening is, look it up, ask your therapist, talk to them about it. It's essentially a way to be able to ask open-ended questions, learn more about the other person, gain insight, gain understanding, being able to empathize, not really putting your own assertion on a situation, right?
Not just waiting for your turn to talk.
Yeah, not just waiting for your turn to talk. Don't sit here and have it like in your mind about what you're going to say next. Be in the moment. Don't do what I just did. Don't do what I just did.
No, but you're right.
But
because you're right. Us therapists were trained in active listening. Yeah. But if that was something that the average person was trained in and fluent in, I think a lot of conflicts and difficult conversations, if you will, wouldn't be so difficult, because you're listening and you're hearing the things, not just what's being verbally stated. And I think that's really, really important. You bring up a good point.
It's really important. Kind of goes back to what you said earlier. Shut the fuck up and listen.
That's right.
It's a valuable thing.
Yeah. I agree with the suggestions you made. I think one thing I would really, really suggest to men and women is I find that the people who find the right partners tend to be the ones that aren't actually actively looking. The journey typically goes something like this. I decided to keep all distractions out of my life, chase greatness, chase my hopes and dreams. And along the way, I found somebody that matched that energy. That tends to be the story of successful couples. Now, don't get me wrong. That doesn't mean they don't use these dating apps or whatever. Sometimes it's that on the journey, they're like, I ain't got time to go to clubs and bars and all this, so I'm going to make a profile. But just to be like, let's see what's out there. And along the way, your profile resonates with somebody who's like, oh my God, that's not exactly me, but it's what I need in my life. I need somebody like that to kind of match my energy, like I said. And usually that's when the magic happens. But I find that when people are on this chase and they have this rigid set of criteria. This is what I want. This is what I want. I won't settle for anything less, whatever. I find those people actually often always settle for something less. Because at some point they realize the chase is fruitless. They're like, I'm never going to find the one I want. Oh my God. But the one thing they never paid attention is working on themselves. And hence, had they worked on themselves, the probability that they would have found the right person would have been higher, because they become their elevated self. But instead, they're just, all the energy goes into searching. They're like those miners that went after gold when all the wells ran dry. And you ain't finding no gold, fool. You're going to find like dirt, right? But that's the thing. They're not working on themselves. And so this idea, I'm trying to find this perfect woman, but I'm a far, far, far from perfect guy. I'm not even perfect by my own standards, right? But I think I deserve the best. It's like trying to win the lottery, but you keep insisting that you should still get the jackpot even though you got the wrong numbers. It's like, no, it doesn't work like that. It's like, yes, boss, you got to promote me even though I have the shittiest productivity in the office. It's like, nope, doesn't work that way, son. So like, you have to be really, really great. You got to love yourself, and you got to love who you are, the good and the bad. You got to define yourself by the steps you took to overcome barriers in your life and be positive about it so that you can be proud of who you are. Then other people can be proud of you. But if you're just like bitter, like those black pill guys, then who's going to love you? You don't really love yourself, right? And so, yeah, you're right. The authenticity, being uniquely you, is so important. But who you are can change day to day. It's just that it's got to change for the better if you want the best in life. And so, yeah, I think don't go chasing the women. Don't go chasing men. Chase your hopes and dreams. Chase greatness by whatever metric you want to define it as. And I find good stuff comes, Mm-hmm. And so, Melody, as we close out this episode, I just want to ask, what's your forecast for modern dating? What is your forecast?
I thought about this. I was like, man, what is dating going to look like in the future? And my answer, I think, is really, I don't know. I'm hopeful for it, because no matter where you are, no matter who you talk to, no matter how something starts, there's always going to have to be face-to-face interaction. Always. At some point down the line. You're going to have to go out and see if you're compatible in different settings. You're going to have to go out and see if you guys find interest within one another. And then when you go to live together and try to cohabitate, you have to see how you work together. I don't think that the process of dating is going to change too much. I think the method in which dating begins is where things are going to change.
Yeah. Do you see the numbers, like it was 37% men, 31% women? Do you see that going up, going down? What are your thoughts?
Honestly, maybe going up, which is really sad to say. But also not... It's really sad to say, but it's not surprising.
No.
And the reason that I think that it's going to go up is because people are going to continue to hold these certain expectations, and online dating and things like that are going to continue to happen, so that there's going to continue to be this conforming that's going to happen, that happened before. And I don't even think that it's about dating overall. It really is also impacted by what people can do on their own now. Right? If you think about it, dating and marriage at one point was survival based.
Yes.
It was so that we could survive based off of what we had in any given moment, right? Back in the day, men needed somebody who were going to take care of the house and take care of the children, right? Mm-hmm. Because they were out working these really ridiculously difficult jobs. And when they were going to come home, they weren't going to have the time to do that, right? Just like we're seeing with some women now. We're out working ridiculously difficult jobs, sometimes physically taxing, sometimes emotionally taxing, mentally taxing. Then we come home and we're tired, and it's like, no, I can't worry about cooking dinner. I can't worry about cleaning the house, putting the laundry away. No. And at that time, that's what we did. And so now that those aspects aren't really 100% necessary, I think that the number of people who are going to date and get married are going to continue going down.
Yeah.
Because we can provide for ourselves. We're sustainable on our own.
You're right. Needs have definitely changed, like you said. It's not as survival driven now. It's more security driven. Like, what can, how can we live our best life? Again, I'm referring to the United States. Other less developed parts of the world, totally different. So yeah, because in the past, men had to be those providers. Although I will say this, the flip side of it, and I can say this: men have always needed women to keep us from dying young, because we'll do things like hunt and do that kind of stuff. But we also do stupid stuff. Like, if it wasn't for women telling us maybe you shouldn't do that, we'd be putting mop buckets on our head and running against the wall on a dare from another guy, jumping out of a plane without a parachute because Bobby over there dared us. Just aim for the bushes. So we would totally do that. We'd go swimming with electric eels on a double dare. But the women in our lives say, nah, you don't really got to do that. So I got to give supportive women their due. It might come off as like you're killing the fun, but you're saving our lives. So I agree with you that the numbers of singles are going to go up. But I have to say, I have a slightly more bleak and like Philip K. Dick dystopian outview on how things are going to be, especially spread out over the long term. Because, science and technology becomes almost exponential, remember how like back in the day computers were gigantic, now they're tiny, right? You got portable computers that fit in your pocket nowadays. And the dating world and on a longer stretch, the married life, I'm going to compare it. I'll make a comparison for the listeners. I'll say it's like, think of where sports and the military have gone in the last 20 years. Okay. See, there's the military and sports have a branding problem right now, because they're trying to convince the consumer that the soldiers today, the athletes today, are better than they ever were. But ain't nobody believes that. That's why the NBA has a superstar problem. The day LeBron retires, Steph Curry retires, Kevin Durant retires, they don't have anybody. They don't have anybody that could be the guy. They got great players now. Giannis is a great player. Luka is a great player. But are they going to be the next LeBron, Jordan, or Kobe? Doubtful. Okay. Because they might be great players, but you wouldn't say they were gritty players. That's the problem. And they forget that grit defined guys like Jordan, like old school players, like love him or hate him, Tom Brady was a great quarterback. Every sport had him, but sports now has these players that want to play less games, but they make 10 times the money that guys like Jordan made. And they want to contribute less. They're building a brand. They're building a superficial identity, and then the military has a recruitment problem. And even with the recruits they have, you think about, like, you have images of the special forces, right? You think these guys are like the best of the best. They still are the best of the best. It's just that the best of the best isn't the best from like the 80s and 90s. And it's, again, I'm not saying this is a criticism of the military. It's just, it's a lot to live up to in an era where, if we're being frank now, most young people, instead of going into sports or going to the military, they'll play PlayStation. And they'll be like, I could have been a soldier if I wanted because I'm good at Call of Duty. Or I could have been a good basketball player, or at the very least a coach because I'm good at NBA 2K. So there's this virtual experience. And video games have kind of, I think, laid the foundation for modern dating, because going back to the 90s games where like they're very immersive and you make friends online, and then there's the chat capability. You never met them, but then you feel really connected to them, to these friends, right? Through shared interests, right? And I see that if that's a precursor to online dating, well, let's see where online gaming has gotten us. It's become more competitive, way more immersive, and then just compare that to modern dating or like on a superficial and like a synthetic level. I, men, I'll say this for men. Uh, there's the whole incel movement is a
Mm.
movement towards doing things like getting sex dolls, going on AI chatbots where like you have a virtual girlfriend. Um, hell, you got companies in Japan making sex robots and stuff. I saw this on the Rogan podcast. They had like this doctor that was talking about that movement. Oh, and I laughed a little bit about it. I won't lie. But then when I thought about it, I came to this conclusion. Again, I'm only speaking for the men because I'm not as well studied into the women's side. If I'm sure women have their own, alternatives to having an organic male in front of them. But some of these men, let's look at the primary drivers: depression, anxiety, sometimes suicidality, certainly ideation. And I'm like, listen, man, if spending $11,000 on a sex robot from Japan that you get to create however you want prevents you from like hanging yourself, man, I'm all for it. If going on an AI bot and having it talk to you and tell you how much it loves you, if that's going to save your life, I'm all for it. Okay, I don't want anybody taking this permanent solution to a temporary problem. Okay,
Yep.
now that's going to contribute to the 37 or 31% going up and up and up and up. Okay, and that's what I kind of see is men and women who just cannot find love, cannot find happiness. And again, maybe it's rooted in the fact they have not found it for themselves. They don't love themselves. It could contribute to this synthetic experience where to us it might seem strange, but you know what? It's going to seem very real to them. And at the end of the day, with all this stuff, this ethical dilemma about is AI is it conscious? Is it in its own consciousness? People might not care. They might think, how is this any different than meeting a girl that lives in Delaware and we're both playing World of Warcraft or something?
Yeah.
And they might think I have control over this because it's my subscription. If I don't like where it's going, I'm just going to cancel it. It's my credit card. You see? So there's that. But I agree with you though that face-to-face interaction is still going to be super important, and there are going to be those who are better at it than others. But I still have faith that as long as we don't live in pods and have a totally like fake meta experience only, and we got to go to the grocery store, we got to go to the mall, we got to go places to meet people, there's still going to be face-to-face interaction. And at some point, you're going to crave it. You'll be like, oh my God, I'm just talking to a computer all day. I want to go talk to somebody. There may be that, and I mean, if you live in a small town, it's probably the trend will be slower. But you live in the big city where like you don't even know your neighbors sometimes,
Yeah.
it's going to take on quickly. But you're right. The ability to talk to people, it's going to help a lot. But I have a very bleak, I actually believe that maybe by 10 years, that might be up at least 5%, at least. That's me being very conservative. It's just because some people are resistant towards marriage and certain resistant towards having children. So that's a whole different thing. And so I could see some people just they've taken themselves out of the race altogether. They've abandoned the idea of love. So they're not even going to go after like AI chatbots. They're just going to be like, nope, I just want to take myself out of the running. And so I do see that. But yeah, like I said, I got a bleak outlook. But hey, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, prove me wrong.
Please do. Please
Yeah,
do.
go out there, and meet each other and work on yourselves, right? Show me up, and I'll be the old guy going like, well, you certainly showed me, right? I'll admit when I'm wrong, and let me tell you, I really want to be wrong. I've got nephews and nieces, and I want them to inherit the world, and I want them to like contribute and be happy and find someone that supports them. But I can't make it happen for them, and I can't make them want it either. So yeah, that's just my view on it, and it's bleak for sure. But I would say if you're listening, leave a comment below. What do you think? What do you think about what Melody and I said? Do you think it's more optimistic, more pessimistic? Do you think we're all doomed? Do you think we're all going to be taken over by robots on Judgment Day? What do you think is going to happen? You know?
Because right now we're both in line with it. We're both just like, yeah, the number of singles is going to go up, but we could definitely be wrong.
Yeah. I mean, so hey, because we haven't even taken in factors like socioeconomic status, immigration status, and all that. But that stuff's been pretty consistent throughout time, so I don't think that's going to have as much of a bearing. But I will acknowledge the experience for those different demographics is completely different. So
yeah.
So so it is what it is. We'll have to wait with bated breath and see, because it's going to change our line of work too. Actually,
oh yeah.
I anticipate lots of changes coming with technology. I mean, it already has with telehealth, and so that's changed a lot. And so, I'm sure you and I are gonna be waiting and seeing how the field changes. It affects us. It'll definitely affect our clients. So
yeah.
So Melody, do you have any closing thoughts on your first episode here?
A question that came to my mind, or an interesting thing that maybe people can debate about in the comments or talk about in the comments, because we're saying that numbers of singles are going to go up, right? And we're talking about all these different factors that are going to come into play. The other thing that would be interesting is divorce rates, because the amount of singles who have never dated versus the amount of people who are now single due to divorce, we might be seeing a lot more singles out there already than we thought that we were.
Oddly enough, I know the stats. Again, this may change, especially if men feel really bitter by divorce. But I know like the divorce rate, depending on day to day, is somewhere anywhere between like 53, 54%, or no, 53, 56%, I think it is. However, the number of people who remarry is very, very high, actually. So that might be the one. If we're talking about coupling, that might be the one protective factor, because you fail once, you want to fail again. I know that's not how people want to look. Okay, it's like nobody looks to you want to repeat championships, not divorces. But yes, it does tend to happen. The stats are not forever in your favor. If you're a divorced person, you're gonna get the likelihood you get married again is gonna be high, and yeah, you don't even want to know. Like, I mean, maybe this could be like a future episode with like divorce rates, but other contributing factors. And I would say actually for listeners who are really interested in knowing divorce stats, causes, and just the story behind like how it began, the middle, and the end, Google or YouTube videos by James Sexton. He does a lot of celebrity divorces. He's super, super charismatic. James Sexton, he did a really, really good interview on that channel, Soft White Underbelly. I mean, broke the internet. He is just so awesome. And for people who are watch that, tell me what you think about his granola story. Leave in comments. I thought it was awesome. But I won't spoil it for listeners. But yeah. I would highly, highly recommend listening to James Sexton, because he's a divorce lawyer, and it's something he mentioned that was really, really interesting was like, and I'll just close out on this, and because I think more couples would actually benefit from hearing this. It's just by the time they hear it's too late. He said like if he had one ability, he wishes he could like go back in time to these couples, because he sees them when they already hate each other, right? And they're trying to take each other for everything they've got. But he says, I wish I could go back in time, be a fly on the wall, and see, like, man, I want to see you on your best day. I want to see how it was with you two on your happiest day together. And like, just because I'm seeing the opposite, I want to see where it was, what you lost. And I always thought that was such a beautiful sentiment, but it's something he'll never get, right? Because of the nature of his job. But yeah, so that's it. So guys, watch our episodes first, then go watch his. But yeah. So Melody, I want to thank you lots for contributing. I know you said you'll be on again, and I definitely appreciate that. And so you guys be sure to check out future episodes with Melody as well. Show her some love in the comments. We've known each other a while, and we've got to grow with this profession as well. So thank you again, Melody.
Thank you so much, Bryan, for having me on. It's been a pleasure, and I can't wait to join future episodes.
Awesome. Take care, everybody.